Hello, I'm Carola Leicht. I'm a researcher and lecturer here at the University of Kent, working with the Centre for the Study of Group Processes. In my research, I'm interested how all forms of diversity can benefit organizations. And with all forms of diversity, I mean diversity in age, ethnicity, beliefs, gender, skills, experience, background, anything really, and how can that really benefit organizations, and in particular how it might facilitate women and minorities to gain access to leadership positions. I do this by taking into account social psychological processes such as stereotypes or implicit and explicit biases that might affect workplace decision, judgments and perceptions. I'm also interested how homogeneous representations of organizations and professions can be challenged and can be overcome, and how these kind of processes are embedded in wider cultures and societies. For this talk, I will focus on on women in leadership, and I really look at how maybe contesting gender stereotypes might help us, or might help interventions trying to help women who are trying to climb the career ladder to get there. So I think it is pretty much common knowledge that women are underrepresented in leadership. And that is across the private and the public sector. So if we look at the private sector, we know that only about 25% of women are represented on boards. And the same is the case for parliament, for senates, where only about 20% across many societies and across many cultures are actually women represented in the Senate or in houses of parliament. So the same is true for the wage gap. We know that across many societies, women still only make about 70p to a pound a man makes. This gender inequality has been picked up over the past decades and has been really picked up by a number of societies and by a number of issues, coming really back to the forefront. And this is testified by campaigns that are heavily funded and celebrity supported, such as the He for She campaign, really trying to get more women, but also more men to identify with the feminist movement to try to overcome gender inequality across, really the whole world. However, what I also think is rooted in this picking up of trying to overcome this gender inequality again lately is the idea that really we cannot, as societies, we cannot only have 50% of the population within these higher ranked positions, because we are not making the best use of our potential that we have out there, of our the resources that we have out there in societies, basically. And this has been picked up and by other campaigns as well, trying to get more women into gender incongruent domains, such as science, technology, engineering and maths. For example, there is a heavily funded EU campaign called Science It's a Girl Thing, really trying to get women to take more up those kind of more male-dominated areas at higher levels of education. Similar things we can see for the private sector, where with the Davies report and with other reports, really there has been much more campaigns and much more initiatives to try to get more women into high executive positions, such as with the initiative Women on Boards, which is also happening in the UK, but also other European countries. So these initiatives are often based on very simple, very intuitive ideas, such as having more role models within organizations or within those male-dominated fields. And these are very intuitive and very it makes sense to do that, because what they're basically trying to say, if we have more women in these positions, or if we have at least some women in those positions, women who are trying to get into STEM, who are trying to get into leadership, will have role models that they can aspire to, and trying really to get this notion into people's heads that if you can see it, you can be it. And these intuitive ideas are supported by research. So it has been shown that actually having role models within your organization can have a positive benefit on a number of psychological variables. So we know that having a role model in your organization can increase your self-esteem and your self-view. It can help you to develop your professional identity. It can inspire you and motivate you to work harder, to do better. And it also can really increase your aspirations to strive and to move forward and to go further than you maybe initially would have. It has also been shown that role models can actually affect behaviors, so it's related to one's career. So it has been shown that having a role model in an organization can actually affect job learning, so how do I behave within my workplace. It can actually change the career-related behaviors, so it can help women to actually be more proactive. And also, research has shown that it actually can directly affect the kind of career choices women and girls make. So, for example, there's quite a lot of research showing that if women or if girls are taught by female maths or natural science teachers, they are much more likely to enter a gender incongruent domain later on in their life. And finally, it has been shown that role models can actually buffer the negative consequences that women often face when they're entering a male-dominated area. So, which is basically showing that it can reduce these kind of stereotype threat effects, which is basically a psychological process that if you are part of a group, like if you're a woman and you know about the stereotypes that women are not supposed to be good in engineering, they're not supposed to be good in computer science, and you have internalized these kind of stereotypes and are then put into a situation where you're supposed to perform in that area, what often happens is that because you're worried about confirming these stereotypes, it takes away your cognitive capacity to actually perform well, which then leads to self-fulfilling prophecy, and you actually perform less well than you could have. So having a role model out there actually helps women to overcome these stereotype threat effects. But also it has been shown that it can actually increase women's leadership behavior, so it can positively affect them. By having a role model, it can actually impact them positively when they're supposed to be in a leadership task, when they're supposed to be, for example, giving a speech, so they're much more confident about their behavior and are much more likely to succeed within that behavior. So a lot of the research that's out there is looking at what kind of effects role models or interventions can have. What I'm really interested in is looking at how contesting stereotypes in the sense of women in leadership, particularly how contesting gender stereotypes or leadership stereotypes can actually have these positive effects. Now, what do I mean by contesting gender stereotypes? Well, I'm sure we've all been in situations where we've been surprised by someone because they're kind of invalidating our stereotypic expectancies. So what do I mean by that? For example, if I'm on the phone to my nan and she keeps talking about this nurse called Pat and how empathetic that Pat is and how great that person is and helping her out and being there for her, and then I go into the nursing home and I meet Pat and I realize Pat is actually a man, and I'm like, oh, that's a bit unusual. I was expecting kind of a middle-aged woman. Or if I go to my local mechanic and I'm greeted by a she-canic, so by a female mechanic, and I'm like, ooh, how does that fit in? And what happens in these kind of situations when my stereotypic expectancies are disconfirmed? What actually happens within our social information processing is that we actually tend to rely less on stereotypes that we have and actually think deeper about the social situations that we are in. And this is what I'm doing in my research a lot. So I give my participants scenarios where they have to think about meeting a female mechanic or a male midwife, and they have to think about what kind of characteristics, what kind of attributes might this person possess. And once they've done that task, and then I ask them, oh, who would you choose as a leader? Who would you prefer? What we can see that sort of very implicit biases that normally affect our choices and who we'd like to have as a leader are attenuated, they are reduced. So really what I'm hoping to do with my research is to look at how we can overcome these underlying, very implicit biases that lead to preferences, certain preferences in leadership, and get away from just looking at what role models or what interventions can do to help women access leadership positions, but to look at more and to overcome also these kind of should or should nots that are always out there, this advice that is given to women, how they should or should not behave, and to look more at sort of the implicit underlying processes that affect this, and that hopefully once we understand those can help us to improve interventions that are out there. So this is it for me. Thank you very much for listening. If you want any more information about my research, any of my research, please feel free to go onto any of those web pages. Thank you very much.